Social issues in the ICT industry, surveillance capitalism, and the new way forward. So here I wanted to talk to you about surveillance capitalism, which is a concept that has been being developed by writer, researcher, academic Shoshana Zuboff, and came out in its magnum opus earlier, I think in 2020, in this book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future and the New Frontier of Power. And it's a very detailed, long book about the way that information technologies operate in the world today. Now, here I'm going to give you a much shorter view of the concept, and hopefully I will get us some understanding of what she means by this. So surveillance capitalism is the new logic of accumulation of capitalism, characterized by the use of big data and analytics to predict and modify human behavior as a means to produce revenue and market control, supported by specific ideologies and institutional frameworks, of course, and the technological frameworks as well, just mentioned. So this was written in 2015, but the concept has also expanded, and I think is a pretty accurate description of how the world of capitalism and technology works today. And she has explains the principles of surveillance capitalism using these four terms that she actually borrows from the Google chief economist Hal Varian, but I don't think he has the same interpretation as her. So here I'm going to just give a brief explanation of certain patterns of surveillance capitalism and how the companies see themselves, their ideologies, their ways of performing and acting and operating in the world today. So data extraction and analysis is a big part of it, new contractual forms of interaction, and the personalization and customization of content, and the principle of continuous experiments. And regarding data extraction and analysis, so this is the continuous and ubiquitous data extraction and analysis process, which obtains data from all sorts of actions, right? So there's, social media, there is financial transactions, social media. What else? Where else does data come from? Social media, just purchases, emails, everything you do online, right? Online activity, and we kind of examine this later too. This promotes big data, the accumulation of lots of data, the necessary hardware to support this big data and to manage it, and the analytical systems of machine learning and artificial intelligence, which combines statistics and programming to analyze the data and predict behaviors and user preferences. Both predict, but also modify, right? So that's kind of an important point. You focus on modify behavior to the extent they wish. Every action a user performs is considered a signal to be analyzed and fed back into the system. So this is part of the machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms. And now regarding new contractual forms. So once again, she develops very detailed and extensive theories about how these elements works. Here we're just having a small focus. The data extraction is not about a reciprocal relationship between provider and consumer, but asymmetric relationship where companies can scan personal emails, the financial information, personal information about persons, via wearable technologies, etc. But it's asymmetric, meaning that the consumer doesn't have this kind of information about the company. Sometimes they don't even have this information about themselves. So there is various asymmetric relationships in our new surveillance capitalism. And this is one of them, how much more knowledge an organization has about us that we have about them. There's also a formal indifference to quality of content. What matters is the quantity, and this is kind of exemplified by Google outbidding all others to provide free Wi-Fi internet service for the 3 billion Starbucks yearly customers. The idea is that if you're the one providing free Wi-Fi internet services, you're seeing all of the content that people are going through. So Google has this gigantic view, not only of all the searches that people do on their platforms, but all the sites that people go to when you're using their Wi-Fi internet services and so on. Not to mention they have Google Chrome, so they can track every single site you ever go to and so on. Personalization and customization. So Google chief economist Hal Varian says, nowadays people have come to expect personalized search results and ads. So instead of asking Google, Google should know what you want and tell you before you even ask the question. So it's the next level of predictions, not just personalized ads, but even predicts before you even think about it. And now this has been realized by Google now to some extent, which is a project of Google. So major component here is personalization and customization of the information that everybody's presented. Of course, the huge problem here I will talk about is the opposition of views, opposition and polarity of views get amplified. Everybody lives in their own filter bubble. Everybody has a different reality of sorts. Maybe there's only two, right? But one group is one and one group is in a totally different one. So that's part of it. Continuous experiments. So there's a shift from a posteriori analysis after the incidents or events, to the real-time, constant observation, communication, analysis, prediction, and modification of actual behavior. It's a kind of what they call reality mining, or patterns of life analysis and predictive analytics. All of reality turns into behavior to be analyzed for profit and control. And some of the biggest players here in terms of acquiring and having all this data is Google, Facebook, and the US National Security Agency. And here I wanted to go over the data brokers to kind of exemplify and show how much data these institutions are actually capturing about people. So there are many companies that are called data brokers, which are companies that keep data about people, and Google and Facebook are probably the major ones, but there are many, many others. And all these companies keep various kinds of data about you. It's not just your emails, it's not just your Facebook posts, and it's not just your web pages. They are keeping all kinds of general interest data about you, what music you like, how many pets you have, whether or not you're a hiker or a biker, what kind of financial data you have, what kind of vehicle data you have, what kind of vehicle, what kind of boat, when did you buy it, what's the brand, what kind of health data you have, court procedures, purchasing behavior, whether you have guns or ammunitions or whether you're Christian, home and neighborhood data, where you live and so on. This is all the information by all the companies. So one single company has all this information on you and me. They keep all of this together. They get it from different sources. These are the data brokers. How do they have your health data? Well, they can find it. They can find as much as they can, and they put it together and they sell it to others as much as they can legally can do it. Your demographic data, of course, occupation, how long you're employed, your household, your travel data, your identifying data, your personally identifying data, your social media data, and so on. And that's one company may have all of these or some of these attributes about people, mostly in the US, but I'm sure they're doing this in other countries as well. And these are the data brokers of the world today, an example of the surveillance capitalism we live in. And the problem of surveillance capitalism also has to do with, as I was saying, the polarity and polarization of people and their projects trying to bring people together because of the enormous harm that these new companies are doing and that this process of surveillance capitalism is doing to us. So one project that I wanted to highlight here is the consilience project. And I kind of wanted to put the definition here of consilience because it's kind of a weird word, or we don't usually see it. But that's the principle that evidence from independent, unrelated sources can converge on strong conclusions. That is, when multiple sources of evidence are in agreement, the conclusion can be very strong, even when none of the individual sources of evidence is significantly so on its own. And the consilience project is applying this concept of consilience to bring people together, given the fact that the technologies of surveillance capitalism, the social media technologies, the Google and the Facebooks of the world in particular, are creating these massive polarization, which is breaking down the social fabric entirely. It's making people incoherent to each other, and they cannot understand with each other. And you can see this in the so-called anti-vaxxer movements and the belief on the so-called the steal of 2020. And one of the people who are highlighting this is Tristan Harris, who did that documentary, The Social Dilemma. Of course, there are others as well. He's one of the more popular figures. So I point out his information to you. There's an interesting podcast on the Joe Rogan podcast recently. Also, you can see more about the Consilience project and other related resources, as well as we have been discussing in this class. That's it for this one. See you next time.